I am Clarissa, 32 years old, and 3 years ago I had a thriving career as a business consultant in Seattle. Then my parents devised a plan that would have derailed my entire life. They tried to manipulate me into becoming my sister's full-time caretaker after her surprise pregnancy. What they didn't expect was my response. I smiled, packed my bags, and disappeared. Let me tell you what happened next. Before I begin, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments, hit that like and subscribe button. If you're ready for a story about standing up for yourself when those who should protect you try to use you instead. Growing up in suburban Minneapolis, my family always appeared close-knit to outsiders. My parents, Richard and Margaret Turner, raised me and my younger sister, Allison, in a comfortable middle-class neighborhood with good schools and safe streets. 8 years separated us, with me being the older sister at 32, and Allison 24 when this story takes place. As children, Allison and I were close despite the age gap. I read her bedtime stories, helped with homework, and defended her from playground bullies. I genuinely enjoyed being the big sister, taking pride in guiding and protecting her. However, as we grew older, I noticed our relationship becoming increasingly one-sided. My achievements were expected, while hers were celebrated extravagantly. My responsibilities multiplied, while hers remained minimal. Throughout school, I maintained straight A's, participated in multiple extracurricular activities, and worked part-time jobs to save for college. I received academic scholarships to attend Northwestern University, where I earned my business degree with honors. After graduation, I secured a position with a prestigious consulting firm in Seattle, climbing the corporate ladder through dedication and long hours. Moving to Seattle was my first real taste of independence. Living 1,500 miles from my family allowed me to establish my own identity beyond being the responsible daughter and helpful sister. I rented a beautiful apartment overlooking Puget Sound, made friends who appreciated me for myself rather than what I could do for them, and eventually met Thomas, my boyfriend of 2 years when this story begins. Thomas worked as a software engineer for a major tech company. Intelligent, kind, and unfailingly supportive, he encouraged my career ambitions and respected my boundaries. Unlike my family, he never took my time or energy for granted. With him, I felt valued for who I was, not just what I could provide. Despite the distance, I maintained regular contact with my family. Monthly visits home became my routine, often coordinated around holidays or special occasions. During these visits, I began noticing subtle shifts in family dynamics that I had previously overlooked or excused. My parents increasingly centered family conversations around Allison's life and needs. Mom would call weekly with updates about Allison's job interviews or apartment searches, subtly suggesting ways I could help her financially or professionally. Dad frequently reminded me how challenging life was for my sister, compared to my easier path, conveniently forgetting the years of hard work that secured my position. Throughout our childhood, this pattern of favoritism had existed, but distance and adult perspective made it impossible to ignore now. When Allison decided to change majors 3 times in college, my parents happily covered the extended tuition. When she wanted to take a 6-month finding herself trip to Europe after graduation, they funded it entirely. Meanwhile, they had expected me to work through college and pay my own way after receiving scholarships. I always justified their behavior. Allison needs more support. She's still finding her way. I'm naturally more independent. I made endless excuses because acknowledging the truth hurt too much. Deep down, I suspected my value to my family was tied to my usefulness, while Allison was loved simply for existing. Then came the phone call that would change everything. It was a Tuesday evening in April. I had just returned home from a long day presenting quarterly projections to clients. As I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto my couch, my phone rang with Allison's ringtone. "Guess what?" Her voice bubbled with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "I'm pregnant." The news stunned me momentarily. Allison had been dating Ryan for only 8 months. They lived in separate apartments, both working entry-level jobs with minimal benefits. "Wow, that's big news," I responded carefully. "How are you feeling about it?" "Scared but excited," she admitted. "Ryan seems happy too, though we're both freaking out a little about the logistics." I immediately offered my support. "If you need anything, just let me know. I can help you research healthcare options. or if you need financial help with doctor's appointments until your insurance kicks in. Thanks, Clarissa. You're always so practical, she said. Mom and Dad want to have a family meeting this weekend. They said it's important that everyone's there in person. Can you fly in? Though I had major project deadlines approaching, the urgency in her voice concerned me. Of course, I'll book a flight for Friday evening. After hanging up, I called Thomas to share the news. A baby? That's a big change for your sister, he remarked. Are you worried about this family meeting? Not really, I replied. They probably just want to discuss how we can all support Allison and the baby. It'll be fine. Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs. The mandatory in-person meeting, the vague but urgent summons, the way they went through Allison rather than asking me directly. But at that moment, I simply saw a family coming together during a time of change. I had no idea that this emergency family meeting would reveal exactly where I stood in my family's eyes, or that it would ultimately force me to choose between their expectations and my own life. The flight to Minneapolis felt longer than usual, as my mind raced with thoughts about Allison's pregnancy and the upcoming family meeting. I spent the journey making mental lists of ways I could help from Seattle, sending care packages, researching parenting resources, perhaps flying back more frequently after the baby arrived. Not once did I consider that my parents had entirely different expectations. Landing Friday evening, I rented a car and drove the familiar route to my childhood home in the suburbs. The modest two-story house with its well-maintained garden looked exactly as it always had. For a moment, nostalgia washed over me as I remembered bike rides in the driveway and summer evenings on the porch. Mom greeted me at the door with an enthusiastic hug. Clarissa, we're so glad you could come on such short notice. Dad emerged from his study to embrace me as well. There's my girl. How was the flight? Allison appeared last, looking remarkably unchanged, despite the life growing inside her. No visible bump yet showed beneath her loose sweater. The prodigal consultant returns, she teased, giving me a quick side hug. The initial greetings felt warm and normal, easing my earlier concerns. Mom had prepared my favorite meal, pot roast with roasted vegetables and apple pie for dessert, which further suggested a celebration rather than crisis. Throughout dinner, conversation remained deliberately light. Mom inquired about my latest projects. Dad discussed a renovation he was planning for the backyard, and Allison shared amusing stories from her administrative job at a local marketing firm. Yet beneath the pleasant exchange, I sensed an undercurrent of tension. My parents exchanged meaningful glances, and Allison seemed unusually subdued between her bursts of forced cheerfulness. After dinner, Dad cleared his throat. Let's move to the living room. We need to discuss some things as a family. We settled into our usual spots, Dad in his recliner, Mom on the love seat with Allison and me in the armchair by the window. The familiar arrangement suddenly felt like positions in a courtroom, with me somehow in the defendant's seat. Dad began, his voice serious. As you know, Allison is expecting. What we haven't mentioned is that Ryan has decided he's not ready for fatherhood. My heart sank for my sister. He left you? I asked, turning to Allison. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. 3 days ago. Said he needed time to think, but then texted that he's moving to Chicago for a job opportunity. He'll pay child support, but that's it. Oh, Allison, I'm so sorry. I moved to sit beside her, taking her hand. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Our girl is going to need family support now more than ever. She can't do this alone. Of course not, I agreed readily. We'll all help however we can. Dad leaned forward, his expression grave, yet somehow rehearsed. That's what we wanted to talk to you about, Clarissa. Your mother and I have been discussing the situation, and we think the best solution would be for you to temporarily move back home. The words hung in the air like smoke, choking and disorienting. I blinked, certain I had misheard. Move back from Seattle. Just temporarily, Mom hastened to add, though her definition of temporary remained conveniently undefined. Until the baby is a bit older, and Allison can get on her feet as a single mother. But my job, my apartment, my relationship, I stammered, trying to process their suggestion. Dad waved dismissively. There are consulting firms in Minneapolis. With your experience, you'd find something quickly. And Thomas could visit or maybe even relocate too if things are serious. The casual way he dismissed the career I'd spent years building stunned me into momentary silence. I had recently been assigned to lead a major project for our biggest client, an opportunity that could fast-track me to a senior position. My apartment lease had another 8 months, and Thomas and I, while serious, weren't ready for a long-distance relationship or hasty relocation. I understand Allison needs support, I said carefully, but there are other ways I can help. I could visit monthly, maybe for a long weekend each time. I could provide financial assistance for childcare. We could set up video calls where That's not the same as being here. Mom interrupted her voice, taking on the emotional tremor she typically employed when guilt-tripping was her objective. A baby needs family. Allison needs her sister. We're not getting any younger ourselves, and the thought of Allison handling night feedings and doctor appointments alone. I wouldn't be alone, Allison interjected, speaking directly to me for the first time since the conversation began. I'd have you. We could even share my apartment if staying with Mom and Dad doesn't work for you. Her assumption that I would uproot my entire life without question left me speechless. The entire conversation felt surreal, as though they were discussing someone else's life they had authority to rearrange. This is a lot to process, I finally managed. You're asking me to give up my career, my home, my relationship, everything I've built for myself. Dad's expression hardened slightly. We're asking you to be there for your sister when she needs you most. Family comes first, Clarissa. I thought we raised you to understand that. The implication was clear. If I hesitated or refused, I was selfish and had failed to absorb the family values they had instilled. The manipulation was so blatant, it should have been comical, yet in that moment, facing their united front of expectation, doubt crept in. I need some time to think about this, I said finally. It's a major life change you're suggesting. Relief flickered across my father's face, not because I needed time, I realized later, but because I hadn't immediately refused. He interpreted my request for consideration as eventual compliance. Of course, he nodded magnanimously. Take tonight to think it through. We can talk more tomorrow. As the conversation shifted to practical matters about Allison's pregnancy, I excused myself to call Thomas from the guest room where I'd be staying. They want me to what? He exclaimed after I explained the situation. That's completely unreasonable that they're asking you to sacrifice everything you've worked for. His immediate validation reassured me that my shock was justified. I know. I can't believe they're even suggesting it, let alone expecting me to agree. What are you going to do? He asked, concern evident in his voice. I told them I need time to think, but honestly, I don't know what to say. If I refuse, I'm the heartless sister abandoning Allison in her time of need. If I agree, I give up everything important to me. Listen to me, Thomas said firmly. You are not responsible for your sister's situation. You can support her without setting yourself on fire to keep her warm. Remember what you told me about your childhood? This sounds like more of the same pattern. His words resonated deeply. Throughout my life, my needs and dreams had been secondary to Allison's. This request wasn't about what was best for everyone involved. It was about what was most convenient for them, regardless of the cost to me. You're right, I sighed. I need to think carefully about how to respond. Something about this whole situation feels off. As I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their request than they were revealing. Little did I know that the next morning would confirm my suspicions in the most painful way possible. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind churning with the impossible choice my family had presented. Around 6 in the morning, I gave up trying and decided to make coffee, hoping an early start might provide clarity. As I approached the kitchen, voices drifted from inside. My parents and Allison already awake and deep in conversation. I still think we should have been more direct, my father was saying, his voice low but clear. Clarissa responds well to directness. No, Richard, this approach is better, my mother countered. She needs to feel it was partly her idea. You know how stubborn she can be when she feels pushed. Freezing in the hallway, I held my breath instinctively, knowing they were discussing me. Do you think she suspects the full plan? Allison asked, sounding worried. My father chuckled. Unlikely. We only mentioned the temporary aspect. Better to get her moved back first before explaining she'll need to quit her job entirely. My blood ran cold. Quit entirely. Not transfer or find new employment in Minneapolis. Once she's here and the baby arrives, she'll be too invested to leave, my mother added confidently. Clarissa has always been responsible to a fault. She won't abandon a newborn once she's bonded with it. And we've already told the family she's moving back to help, Allison said. Aunt Carol was saying how selfless and wonderful Clarissa is, giving up her Seattle life to become my built-in support system. Their words sliced through me like physical blows. They had already announced my decision to extended family before even asking me. They were deliberately manipulating me into a situation I hadn't agreed to, with plans far beyond what they'd suggested last night. The timing actually works out perfectly, my father continued. With Allison due in November, Clarissa can handle the night feedings during the crucial first few months while Allison recovers. Then she can watch the baby when Allison returns to work in February. It's just a job anyway, Allison said dismissively. Not like Clarissa has her own family to worry about. My mother made a sympathetic noise. She does have that boyfriend, but long-distance relationships rarely last. If it's meant to be, he'll wait or move here. And Clarissa can always return to consulting in a few years once the baby is in school. A few years. They were planning to hijack not months but years of my life. She's always been the responsible one, my father said, echoing Allison's earlier sentiment. That's why we expect more from her. She's capable of handling it. Their words revealed the ugly truth I had spent years trying not to see to them. I was a resource to be utilized, not a person with my own dreams and needs. My worth was measured by my usefulness to the family, particularly to Allison. Silently, I retreated to the guest room, my hands shaking so badly I had to sit on the edge of the bed. The conversation replayed in my mind, each word cementing my understanding of my place in the family. After collecting myself, I returned to the kitchen, pretending I had just woken up. They greeted me with smiles that now seemed sinister in their falseness. "Sleep well, honey?" Mom asked, sliding a cup of coffee toward me. "Not really," I replied honestly, studying their faces. My father looked vaguely impatient, my mother concerned but determined, and Allison expectant. None showed a trace of guilt about the conversation I had overheard. "I've been thinking about what we discussed last night," I began carefully. "I have some questions about what exactly you're envisioning." Dad folded his newspaper. "Of course. What do you want to know?" "How long is temporary?" I asked directly. The three exchanged glances before Mom answered. "Well, at least until the baby is sleeping through the night regularly. Maybe until Allison's maternity leave ends." "And what about my job? Are you expecting me to request a transfer, work remotely, or—" Dad cleared his throat. "To be honest, Clarissa, we don't see how you could effectively help Allison while maintaining your current work schedule. Consulting involves long hours and travel, doesn't it? That wouldn't be compatible with childcare responsibilities." There it was, the confirmation of what I'd overheard. "So you're asking me to quit my job entirely?" I stated flatly. "Think of it as a career pause," Mom suggested brightly. "Lots of women take time off for family reasons." "But it's not my baby," I pointed out. "I'm not the one who chose to become a parent." Allison's face darkened. "Wow, thanks for the reminder that my situation is entirely my fault." "I didn't say that," I replied, frustration mounting. "But there's a difference between supporting you and completely taking over your responsibilities." "No one's asking you to take over," Dad said, though his earlier conversation proved otherwise. "We're asking you to be a supportive sister during a difficult time." "And what about my life, my relationship, my career goals?" I pressed. Mom reached across the table to pat my hand condescendingly. "Sweetie, sometimes life throws curveballs that require us to adjust our personal plans. Family duty comes before personal ambition." The phrase echoed what I'd overheard earlier. They had rehearsed this conversation, prepared counter-arguments for any resistance I might offer. "What exactly would you expect from me on a daily basis?" I asked, wanting to hear them admit the extent of their expectations. Allison brightened, perhaps thinking I was coming around. "Well, during my maternity leave, we could tag team the baby care. Then when I return to work, you could handle the daytime child care. It would save so much money compared to daycare, and the baby would be with family instead of strangers." "I'd be a full-time unpaid nanny," I summarized bluntly. "Family doesn't keep score about money," Dad responded, his tone sharpening. "When you were young, did your mother calculate an hourly rate for raising you?" The false equivalence was breathtaking. I was not the child's parent, yet they expected me to take on parental responsibilities and sacrifice as if I were. Your sister needs you more than your company does right now, Mom added tearfully. There will always be consulting jobs, but this baby will only be little once. Their tactics were so transparent now that I could see the manipulation behind them. Guilt obligation, emotional blackmail, false equivalencies minimizing my concerns, and exaggerating Allison's needs. As the conversation continued in circles, I learned that they had already told grandparents, aunts, uncles, and family friends about my decision to move back. The narrative painted me as the selfless big sister sacrificing for family, making it virtually impossible to refuse without appearing heartless to the entire extended family. Feeling increasingly cornered and overwhelmed, I excused myself. I need some air. I'm going for a walk. Outside in the crisp morning air, I called Maya my closest childhood friend, who still lived in Minneapolis. She agreed to meet me at a nearby coffee shop within the hour. They want you to do what? Maya exclaimed after I explained the situation. Her outrage validated my own feelings. Am I being selfish? I asked the question that had been plaguing me. Is it wrong to prioritize my own life over helping my sister? Maya shook her head emphatically. Absolutely not. There's a difference between offering reasonable help and being expected to completely derail your life. This isn't the first time they've taken advantage of you, Clarissa. She reminded me of incidents I had normalized over the years, my parents missing my college graduation because Allison had a dance recital, them borrowing money from me never repaid for Allison's study abroad program, while I worked 2 jobs to pay my own expenses. How family gatherings inevitably centered around Allison's needs and accomplishments, while mine were treated as expected rather than celebrated. You've spent your entire life being the responsible one, the giver, Maya said gently. You deserve a life of your own design, not one dictated by their expectations. Our conversation provided the outside perspective I desperately needed. The family dynamic I had accepted as normal was anything but, and their current demand was simply the most extreme example of a lifelong pattern. With renewed clarity, I returned to the house unaware that an even greater shock awaited me there. When I returned to my parents' house after meeting with Maya, an eerie quiet greeted me. Following voices to the second floor, I found my family in my old bedroom, now the guest room where I was staying. What I saw stopped me cold in the doorway. My parents and Allison were surveying the room discussing renovations. Mom gestured toward the walls, suggesting a pale yellow paint color. Dad measured the window, mentioning custom blinds that would better block light for daytime naps. Allison stood by my old desk, now holding my suitcase and personal items that had been packed up without my knowledge. What's going on? I asked, my voice unnaturally calm, despite the chaos inside me. They turned momentarily startled by my presence. Oh, Clarissa! Mom recovered quickly. We were just discussing how to convert this room into the nursery. It has the best morning light and is closest to Allison's old room where she'll be staying. I see, I said, noticing my childhood keepsakes, photographs, books, and mementos I'd stored in the closet, had been boxed up and stacked in the hallway. And my things? We thought we'd move you to the basement guest room, Dad explained casually. It's smaller but more private. You'll appreciate that once the baby arrives and the upstairs gets noisy with night feedings. They had already assigned me living quarters in a home I hadn't agreed to move into for a situation I hadn't accepted. Did it occur to any of you to ask me before packing my things and planning room reassignments? I inquired, maintaining my composure through sheer force of will. Allison rolled her eyes. We were just getting things organized. You're being dramatic. Those 3 words, you're being dramatic, struck something deep within me. How many times throughout my life had my valid concerns been dismissed with that phrase? How often had my feelings been minimized while Allison's were centered? Before I could respond, Dad's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, then answered with a warm, "Hello, Tim. Thanks for calling back so quickly." Tim was my boss's name. A chill ran through me. Yes, she's still considering the details, but we wanted to give you advance notice about Clarissa's family situation. Dad continued, walking past me into the hallway. I followed him, disbelief mounting, as I overheard him explaining to my boss that I would need to resign due to a family emergency requiring my indefinite presence in Minneapolis. He spoke with the authority of someone discussing his own career, not his adult daughter's, as he ended the call with a satisfied, "I appreciate your understanding." I snatched the phone from his hand. "Did you just call my boss about my resignation?" I demanded, voice shaking with fury. Dad appeared genuinely confused by my anger. I thought I'd help get the ball rolling. Tim seemed very understanding about the situation. "That wasn't your call to make," I said, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "You had absolutely no right." "Don't use that tone with your father," Mom admonished, joining us in the hallway. "He's trying to help ease your transition." Transition to what? A life I never agreed to. I turned to face all three of them now. "Do you realize that you've been making decisions about my life without my consent? Packing my belongings, calling my boss, telling extended family I'm moving home, all before I've agreed to anything." "We assumed after our talk last night that you understood the necessity of the situation," Dad replied stiffly. "Necessity for whom? Certainly not for me." My voice rose despite my efforts to remain calm. "Let me be absolutely clear, I am not quitting my job. I am not moving back to Minneapolis. I am not becoming Allison's unpaid nanny." Allison's face crumpled into tears, her standard response when not getting her way. "I knew you wouldn't help me. You've always resented me." "This isn't about resentment," I countered. "This is about boundaries and respect, neither of which any of you have shown me." "We've always expected more from you because you're capable," Dad stated firmly, repeating almost verbatim what I'd overheard that morning. "Your sister needs support now, and as family, you have a responsibility to provide it." My mother joined Allison in tearful manipulation. "I never thought I'd raise a daughter who would abandon her sister in her greatest time of need. What would your grandparents think if they knew you were putting your job above family?" Their words should have cut deep, and once they would have. But something had shifted inside me. Instead of guilt, I felt clarity. Instead of obligation, I felt determination. Physical symptoms of my distress manifested. My heart raced. My breathing became shallow, my hands trembled. But beneath the anxiety surged a powerful certainty. This pattern would continue endlessly, unless I broke it decisively. "I need some space," I managed to say, retreating to the bathroom where I locked the door and sank to the floor. With shaking hands, I called Thomas. "They called my boss about my resignation," I whispered when he answered, afraid of being overheard. "They packed up my belongings and are converting my room to a nursery, all without my agreement." "Clarissa, this is beyond inappropriate." Thomas responded, alarm evident in his voice. "This isn't just overstepping. This is actively trying to hijack your life." "I feel like I'm going crazy," I admitted. "They're so certain I'll give in that they're already rearranging their home and my career." "You're not crazy," he assured me. "Their behavior is extreme and manipulative. What do you want to do?" The question struck me as profound. What did I want? For years, what I wanted had been secondary to family expectations. Now faced with this ultimate demand, I realized I had to prioritize myself or risk losing everything I had built. "I want to come home," I said with sudden clarity. "To my real home in Seattle, not this place where I'm only valued for what I can provide." "Then do it," Thomas encouraged. "Book the next flight out. I'll pick you up at the airport no matter what time you arrive." "They'll be furious," I warned, though I was already mentally calculating how quickly I could leave. "Probably," he agreed. "But you need to ask yourself, do you want to spend your life making decisions based on preventing their anger, or based on your own well-being?" His question crystallized everything. For 32 years, I had calibrated my choices to avoid disapproval, maintain peace, and fulfill obligations imposed by others. The result was a family who saw me as a resource rather than a person with valid needs and dreams of my own. "You're right," I said, a sense of calm replacing my panic. "I'm coming home tomorrow morning, the earliest flight I can get." As I ended the call with Thomas, a strange tranquility settled over me. The decision was made. The path forward was clear. All that remained was execution. I splashed cold water on my face, took several deep breaths, and unlocked the bathroom door. Whatever confrontation awaited, I would face it with the knowledge that I was finally belatedly standing up for myself. After our confrontation, my family retreated to their corners of the house, each processing their anger and disappointment in different ways. Dad sequestered himself in his study, Mom busied herself aggressively cleaning the kitchen, and Allison locked herself in her bedroom, occasionally emitting dramatic sobs loud enough to be heard downstairs. Their reactions, once effective tools of manipulation, now reinforced my decision to leave. In the guest room, I sat on the bed and formulated a strategic plan. Emotion would not serve me now. I needed clarity and purpose to execute a clean break. With methodical focus, I began by booking a flight home for 6 a.m. the next morning. The early departure would allow me to leave before the household awoke, avoiding another emotional confrontation that might wear down my resolve. Next, I called Tim, my boss, to clarify that I had no intention of resigning. Fortunately, he seemed relieved. "Your father's call struck me as odd," he admitted. "It didn't align with what I know of you or your commitment to the Westridge project. I'm glad to hear you're continuing with us." One potential crisis averted. I then contacted my landlord to confirm my lease was still in good standing, fearing my parents might have interfered there as well. Thankfully, they hadn't reached that far into my affairs. With my immediate concerns addressed, I turned to the more difficult task, writing a letter to my family. While I could simply leave without explanation, something within me needed to articulate the boundaries I was establishing. After several drafts, I produced a clear, firm message that avoided both excessive emotion and unnecessary cruelty. "Mom, Dad, and Allison, I am returning to Seattle this morning. My decision is final and not open to negotiation. The expectations you have placed on me are unreasonable and disrespectful of my life choices. Calling my boss, packing my belongings, and planning my indefinite relocation without my consent demonstrated a fundamental disregard for my autonomy as an adult. I am willing to support Allison through her pregnancy and early motherhood in ways that respect my own boundaries. Monthly weekend visits, regular video calls, and financial assistance for childcare when needed. What I am not willing to do is sacrifice my career, relationship, and independence to become an unpaid live-in nanny. The pattern of expecting disproportionate sacrifice from me while minimizing my needs ends today. I love you all, but I cannot maintain relationships that require me to diminish myself to be accepted. I will reach out when I am ready to discuss rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms. Clarissa." Reading over the letter, I felt a mixture of sadness and liberation. The words were firm, but not cruel, clear, but not vindictive. They established the boundaries I should have set years ago. With the letter written, I turned my attention to practical matters. I packed methodically, ensuring I collected all personal items of importance. In the back of my closet, I found my childhood photo album and sat cross-legged on the floor flipping through memories. There I was at 8 years old, proudly holding newborn Allison. At 12, helping her with her first bicycle. At 16, attending her elementary school graduation. So many moments of genuine love and care, now shadowed by the knowledge of how one-sided that care had become. I selected a few meaningful photos, ones that reminded me of happier times without the current complications, and tucked them into my suitcase. The rest I left behind, a symbolic relinquishing of the role I had played for too long. By midnight, my preparations were complete. I set my alarm for 4:30 a.m. and tried to sleep, though rest came fitfully. At precisely 4:30, I silently dressed, gathered my belongings, and placed the letter prominently on the kitchen table, where it would be found with the morning coffee. Standing in the silent house, I felt a strange duality of emotions. Grief for the family relationship I had always wanted, but never truly had, and profound relief at choosing myself, perhaps for the first time in my adult life. I ordered a rideshare instead of calling a taxi, reducing the chance of alerting my light-sleeping father with a car horn. When the app showed my driver 3 minutes away, I slipped out the front door, carefully closing it behind me, without a sound. The cool pre-dawn air filled my lungs as I waited at the end of the driveway, suitcase beside me. When the car arrived, the driver loaded my bag, while I took one last look at the house where I had grown up. The weight of expectations that had always hung over that place seemed almost visible in the dim glow of the porch light. "Airport, right?" the driver confirmed as I settled into the back seat. "Yes," I nodded, feeling the finality of my decision. I'm going home. The drive to the airport passed in contemplative silence. Despite the emotional turbulence of the past 2 days, my mind felt remarkably clear. I had spent decades trying to earn my family's approval through self-sacrifice, never realizing that true acceptance shouldn't require the erasure of my own needs. At the airport, the morning bustle of travelers provided anonymous comfort. I moved through security and to my gate, feeling lighter with each step away from Minneapolis. When my flight landed in Seattle 3 hours later, Thomas was waiting as promised. The sight of his familiar face, concerned but supportive without judgment or expectation, brought tears to my eyes for the first time since I'd made my decision. "Welcome home," he said simply, wrapping me in an embrace that asked nothing of me except my presence. As we drove to my apartment, I described the final confrontation and my early morning departure. "What will you do now?" Thomas asked. "They'll try to contact you." "Radio silence," I replied with newfound certainty. "I'm changing my number today and taking a break from social media. I need time and space to process everything without their voices in my head." He nodded in understanding. "Whatever you need, I'm here." Arriving at my apartment, the space that had nearly been taken from me without consent, I felt a surge of gratitude. This was my home filled with choices I had made for myself. No one could take it from me unless I allowed it. As I unpacked my suitcase and settled back into my life, I realized that the physical distance from my family needed to be matched by emotional distance as well. For the first time, I could see clearly that their behavior wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment, but the culmination of a lifetime of unhealthy dynamics. The decision to vanish from their radar wasn't made lightly, but it was necessary. To rebuild myself and establish healthy boundaries, I needed complete separation from their influence. Later that day, I changed my phone number, email password, and privacy settings on all social accounts. Then I called my office. "Tim, I'll be in tomorrow morning," I said when my boss answered. "I'd like to discuss the Westridge project timeline in person." "Glad to hear it," he replied, and I was surprised by the respect in his tone. "For what it's worth, Clarissa standing your ground was the right call. We value your work here." That simple professional acknowledgement of my worth, free from emotional manipulation, meant more than any family validation ever had. As evening fell on my first day back in Seattle, I sat by my window overlooking the city lights. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. My family wouldn't accept my boundary setting without a fight. But for the first time in my life, I was choosing my own direction, guided by my own North Star, rather than the expectations of others. I had vanished from their manipulative grasp, not out of malice, but out of self-preservation. What would happen next remained to be seen, but whatever came, I would face it on my own terms. 3 months passed without contact from my family, not because they didn't try, but because I had erected careful barriers against their intrusion. The first week brought dozens of calls to my old number, which now played an automated disconnection message. My email filled with increasingly desperate, then angry messages that I filtered into a special folder, reading them only when I felt emotionally strong enough to withstand their content. During this period of separation, I focused intensely on rebuilding my sense of self outside the family dynamics that had defined me for so long. Weekly therapy sessions became my anchor, providing a structured space to unpack decades of conditioning. What you're describing is a classic golden child scapegoat dynamic. With an unusual twist, my therapist, Dr. Winters, explained during an early session. Instead of being the scapegoat, you were valued conditionally, the responsible one, who could always be counted on to sacrifice. Your worth was tied to your usefulness. Those words struck deep, articulating what I had felt, but couldn't name. In subsequent sessions, we explored how this dynamic had shaped my relationships, my career choices, even my tendency to overwork and overfunction in all areas of life. "Notice when you're taking responsibility that isn't yours," became Dr. Winter's gentle reminder whenever I slipped into old patterns. Professionally, I channeled my newfound clarity into my work. The Westridge project that I had nearly been forced to abandon became my focus, and my performance exceeded even my own expectations. 2 months into my return, I received a promotion to senior consultant with a substantial raise and expanded team leadership responsibilities. Your work these past months has shown exceptional focus and innovation. My director commented during the promotion meeting. Whatever personal challenges you've been navigating, they seem to have sharpened rather than diminished your capabilities. She couldn't know how profound her observation was. Freeing myself from the emotional labor of managing my family's expectations had released energy I never realized was being drained away. My relationship with Thomas deepened as well. Without the constant undercurrent of family obligation pulling at me, I could be fully present in our shared life. We began cautiously discussing a future together. Not immediate plans, but possibilities that excited rather than overwhelmed me. Most significantly, I developed a chosen family of friends who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. Maya visited from Minneapolis, careful not to bring news of my family unless I specifically asked. New friendships blossomed with colleagues and neighbors, creating a support network built on mutual respect rather than obligation. But my family did not accept my disappearance quietly. After exhausting direct contact attempts, they escalated dramatically. My father called my colleagues claiming a family emergency. My mother showed up at my workplace only to be politely turned away by security when I declined to come down. Allison left tearful voicemails on Thomas's phone since she couldn't reach mine. The most extreme incident came when my parents flew to Seattle unannounced, appearing at my apartment building one Sunday morning. The doorman, following my previous instructions about unauthorized visitors, refused them entry and called to warn me. From my window, I watched them standing on the sidewalk looking up at the building where they knew I was but couldn't reach. The sight caused a complex surge of emotions: guilt, sadness, anger, and beneath it all, a steely resolve to maintain the boundaries I had established. Their persistence was relentless, yet with each attempt at breaching my boundaries, my determination only strengthened. They had spent decades assuming their needs automatically outranked mine. Such entrenched patterns would not be undone easily. An unexpected ally emerged in my father's sister, Aunt Jennifer. Unlike my parents, she reached out with genuine concern rather than manipulation. "I want you to know that I understand why you've created distance," her email began. "Your parents aren't telling the whole story, but I've always seen how much has been expected of you compared to your sister. Whatever you need, even if it's continued space, you have my support." Her message, free from judgment or pressure, offered a glimpse of what family relationships could be when built on mutual respect. We began corresponding regularly, her messages becoming a healing connection to extended family, without the toxicity of my immediate one. 6 months into my self-imposed separation, I found myself increasingly able to reflect on my family with compassion, rather than just hurt. They were operating from their own wounding and limitations, trapped in patterns likely passed down through generations. Understanding this didn't excuse their behavior, but it helped me view them with greater emotional distance. One evening, after discussing the situation with both Dr. Winters and Thomas, I decided it was time to establish controlled contact, not because they had earned it, but because I was strong enough now to engage without losing myself. Carefully crafting an email with my therapist's guidance, I established clear conditions for resuming limited communication. 1. Acknowledgement of the inappropriate expectations they had placed on me. 2. Respect for my career and life choices moving forward. 3. No unsolicited advice or pressure regarding Allison's situation. 4. Communication only through email, initially progressing to calls only when trust had been rebuilt. 5. An understanding that any violation of these boundaries would result in immediate disengagement. I sent the message with trembling fingers, but a steady heart, uncertain what response would come, but confident in my ability to handle whatever followed. The path to rebuilding relationship with my family would be neither straight nor simple, but I was no longer the same person who had fled in the pre-dawn darkness 6 months earlier. That woman had been defined by others' expectations. The person I was becoming was authoring her own story. What happened next would shape the future of our family relationship, but it would no longer define my worth or dictate my choices. That power I had reclaimed for myself, and I would never surrender it again. 6 months after my disappearance, as summer warmth gave way to autumn crispness in Seattle, an unexpected letter arrived in my mailbox. Not an email, but an actual handwritten letter on my mother's distinctive stationery. The Minneapolis postmark triggered a momentary tightness in my chest, but I opened it with steady hands, prepared for either another guilt trip or perhaps something new. What I found inside was unprecedented in my 32 years. Dear Clarissa, my mother's familiar handwriting began. First, I want to acknowledge receipt of your email and its conditions. Your father, sister, and I have spent considerable time discussing your boundaries and reflecting on our behavior that led to your departure. With the distance of time, I can now see that what we asked of you was not just unreasonable, but deeply unfair. We expected you to sacrifice everything you had built for yourself to solve a situation that was never your responsibility to fix. More painfully, I recognize that this was not an isolated incident, but the culmination of a pattern that has existed throughout your life. We have consistently expected more from you than from Allison, justified it as recognizing your capability, and failed to value your needs and dreams with the same consideration we gave hers. I cannot undo the hurt we caused, but I can tell you that your absence has forced us all to confront uncomfortable truths about our family dynamics. If you are willing, we would like to meet on neutral ground of your choosing to begin rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms. Whatever you decide, know that we love you, not for what you can do for us, but for who you are, with regret and hope. Mom, I read the letter 3 times, searching for the subtle manipulation or guilt-inducing language that had characterized our interactions for decades. Finding none, I shared it with Dr. Winters at our next session. What do you think? I asked after she had read it carefully. Is this genuine or another tactic? Only time and actions will reveal that, she replied thoughtfully. The letter itself shows awareness and accountability, which is promising. The question is whether you feel ready for contact regardless of their readiness. After careful consideration and discussion with Thomas, I decided to respond cautiously. I suggested meeting my mother alone first at a coffee shop in downtown Seattle, neutral territory, where neither of us would have the home field advantage. 2 weeks later, I spotted her sitting nervously by the window of the cafe we had agreed upon. She looked older somehow, the months of separation etched in new lines around her eyes. When she saw me, her face lit up with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Clarissa," she said simply, rising but not approaching, respecting the physical distance I maintained. "Mom?" I nodded, taking the seat across from her. "Thank you for coming." The conversation began awkwardly with surface-level updates and careful politeness. Gradually, though, we moved toward the substantive issues that had driven us apart. "Your father and I have been seeing a family therapist," she revealed, surprising me. "It was Aunt Jennifer's suggestion, actually. She's been quite forthright about her perspective on our family dynamics." I couldn't help but smile at the thought of my straightforward aunt calling out behaviors that had gone unchallenged for decades. "The therapist helped us see that we've treated you as an extension of ourselves rather than as your own person," my mother continued. "We justified our expectations by telling ourselves that family sacrifices for each other, but the sacrifices always seemed to flow one direction." Her insight and accountability were unlike anything I had experienced from her before. "What about Allison?" I asked the question that had hovered beneath the surface. "How is she handling the pregnancy and everything else?" "She had the baby 6 weeks ago. A boy, Nathan," Mom replied, pulling out her phone, but not pushing it toward me again, respecting my space until I reached for it. The photo showed my sister holding a tiny bundle, looking exhausted but happy. A complicated tenderness washed over me. This was my nephew, innocent of the conflict surrounding his arrival. "She's managing," Mom continued. "It's been challenging for her to adjust to single motherhood, even with our help. Your father and I are providing childcare 3 days a week while she works. She has a nanny for the other 2 days." The arrangement they had created was reasonable and appropriate, the kind of support parents should provide without conscripting other family members. "The reality of motherhood has matured her in ways we didn't expect," Mom added. "She's mentioned several times that she understands now why you couldn't give up your life for her child. She regrets her entitlement." Though gratifying to hear, I remained cautious. "I'd like to believe that represents genuine growth, not just a temporary insight." "That's fair," Mom acknowledged. "Only time will show whether these changes are lasting. All I can say is that your absence forced us to confront patterns we had normalized for too long." Our conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, covering painful territory with a new honesty that felt both strange and hopeful. Before parting, we agreed to a second meeting that would include my father scheduled for the following month. Allison would join a separate conversation when I felt ready. True to their word, my parents maintained the boundaries I had established in subsequent interactions. Our monthly meetings gradually built a cautious new foundation for our relationship, not the unquestioning closeness of before, but something potentially healthier. 4 months after our first coffee shop meeting, I flew to Minneapolis for a carefully planned day visit to meet my nephew. Nathan was by then 5 months old, a cheerful baby with Allison's eyes and an easy smile. "He looks like you did as a baby," Allison remarked as I held him. The statement hung between us an acknowledgement of our shared history and blood connection despite our complicated relationship. "I'm sorry, Clarissa," she said suddenly, her voice uncharacteristically humble. "I took you for granted for so long. I assumed your life was mine to rearrange because that's what I'd always been taught, that you were the strong one who would handle everything." Her apology felt genuine, born from the perspective shift that often comes with parenthood. "I'm learning to do this on my own," she continued, gesturing toward the organized chaos of baby gear around her apartment. "It's hard, but it's my responsibility, not yours. Though I'd welcome you in Nathan's life as his aunt, not his caretaker, if you're open to that." The distinction, aunt not caretaker, represented a fundamental shift in how she viewed my role. For the first time, she was offering a relationship based on mutual choice rather than obligation. Over the following year, our family dynamics continued their slow evolution. My parents maintained appropriate boundaries, though occasional slips into old patterns required gentle but firm correction. Allison developed unexpected independence as a mother, relying on proper support systems rather than expecting family to sacrifice unreasonably. My own life flourished in the space created by healthy boundaries. Thomas proposed on our third anniversary, presenting a ring and a question that represented choice rather than expectation. "Yes." I answered without hesitation, secure in the knowledge that this commitment came from desire rather than obligation. When I shared our engagement news with my family, their response was appropriately enthusiastic but respectful of our timeline and preferences. No pressure about wedding dates, locations, or planning, just genuine happiness for our happiness. The true test came when my parents visited Seattle for our small engagement dinner. As they raised their glasses in toast, my father spoke words I had never expected to hear from him. "To Clarissa and Thomas," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "Watching you build a life of your own choosing has been a profound lesson for me. I spent too many years measuring your worth by what you could do for our family, rather than celebrating who you are. Your courage in setting boundaries has given our family the opportunity to become something healthier. We're grateful and we're proud of you, not for what you achieve or provide, but simply because you are you." Tears welled in my eyes as the words washed over me, the acknowledgement I had always sought without realizing it. Not praise for being useful, responsible, or selfless, but recognition of my inherent value apart from what I could give. Looking around the table at Thomas, my parents, and the friends who had supported me through my journey, I realized the profound truth that had emerged from my painful family rupture. Our worth never depends on our usefulness to others. True love doesn't demand sacrifice of self as its price. And sometimes the most loving thing we can do, both for ourselves and ultimately for others, is to disappear from unhealthy dynamics long enough for new, healthier patterns to emerge. My decision to vanish had shocked my family system into transformation. By refusing to play my assigned role, I had created space for everyone, including myself, to grow into something better. Now, as I hold my nephew during monthly visits that occur entirely on my terms, or share Sunday video calls with my parents, that end when I choose, I live the reality that healthy love has room for both connection and autonomy. I maintain firm boundaries when needed, and offer genuine warmth within those boundaries. I give from abundance rather than obligation, and I receive without guilt. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? How did you balance love with self-protection? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe, and share with someone who might need permission to prioritize their own well-being. Remember, sometimes walking away is the bravest form of love, both for yourself and ultimately for those you leave behind, long enough to find their own way forward. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to write your own on your own terms.